Welcome to the Cyber Call, the podcast by Ride It Boom for managed service providers looking to stay ahead in an ever-changing world of cybersecurity. Each week, we dive into the latest threats, trends, and real-world strategies to help MSPs protect their clients and grow their businesses. Let's build a safer, stronger community together.
All right, welcome back. It's been a few weeks. Chris, we all tried, me, you, and Phyllis, and some others tried to get on here a week ago. And I think many others also tried to get on here, as well as seemingly thousands. I couldn't get on. We were talking, Chris, about the important things like Roblox and Snapchat, and Phyllis, of course, couldn't get on, Snapchat. So she was pretty upset. And
right.
She still hasn't recovered completely.
Yeah. So a week ago marks the AWS outage. And so let's just, as we always do, as we let people start to come in and welcome everybody, just kind of talk a little bit about the AWS outage. Chris, I want to talk about it from the perspective of, companies often do tabletops if they are doing tabletops right now, but if they are doing tabletops, it's, let's test a BEC, let's test malware, things of that nature. Often it's not, let's test our continuity plans. I know personally, Ride It Boom's a small company, and, we learned real fast everybody that was using AWS. And Chris, you pointed out something I thought real interesting on one of the calls, which was, it's not, whoever's typing, can you mute, by the way? You pointed out real quick, not only did we figure out productivity tools, but we figured out our security tools also. Didn't you mention that you heard some security tools weren't functioning properly?
Exactly. Like email filtering was a good example. I think people had certain solutions for email filtering for their clients, and things weren't exactly working correctly. And also, I think it's one of these things where it wasn't black and white, right? It wasn't like, hey, it's down. It's like what we use here, right, Andrew? I mean, you could get to a certain point of trying to join in as a host on this. Mm-hmm. And for you, it was fine, but for the co-host, it wasn't. And so it wasn't like it was just like, no, we're hard down. It was a certain portion or a functionality or a feature. And that's what really kind of quickly educated people on what their dependencies were and those things that, I guess, the hidden dependencies that they had. Yeah.
Jason, I'm going to maybe just pull on a string on you as somebody, and we'll let you introduce yourself in a bit, but as somebody that, chairs the Cloud Security Alliance's Zero Trust and has, obviously very strong background in cloud architectures, like, if someone, one of your clients, which you deal with some big ones, says, hey, how should we have thought about our continuity strategy in this? A, what would you advise? And B, do you think people were ready for this, even the big boy, like big corporations, or were people caught flat-footed?
I think people were definitely caught flat-footed. And I mean, there's some point in this kind of root of dependencies where you sort of have to rely on that root to not go down. And obviously, in many cases, this did. And I think this shows us that even if your vendors had built themselves with resiliency across different availability zones or different regions, that there were still, perhaps unknown to them, dependencies inside of AWS where it didn't matter if your service was running in US West or wherever, that they had single dependencies on certain services inside of US East that were brought down. And I think, at some point inside of enterprises, we have to realize we are going to have some of these dependencies. I mean, do we ever recommend to an enterprise, set up a duplicate parallel identity provider so that if, your favorite SaaS one goes down for 6 hours, you can still log in? People don't do that because it's just so much overhead and so much expense, unless you're in certain circumstances. It is important to model the failure modes, but, at some point you kind of have to say, all right, there's certain services that are, tier 0 for us, and we have to live with that risk and have a plan, at least, when maybe the plan is, okay, everyone go home and take the day off. Some businesses can do that and some businesses can't.
Yeah, fair enough. Amit, you play on the SASE side of things, so this is in essence near and dear to your heart from a cloud perspective. Any thoughts on this? You know, if MSPs or enterprises asked you, I mean, you played in the enterprise space prior to starting Timis and all, but what are your thoughts on this?
To me, like with SASE, people are moving their on-prem security solutions to the cloud, right? And the irony of the cloud going down reminded me that the resilience is actually a part of zero trust. So assuming failure and designing for continuity, because we are trusting all these new modernized stacks, zero trust, SASE, moving everything to the cloud, then it's all going down.
Yeah.
And it's not only a single tool, single vendor. I agree with Jason on this. So it doesn't matter if you're like you have redundant services and everything. When your identity provider goes down, everything falls apart. So
Yeah.
It's a critical part of zero trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Net, did you guys deal with it as an MSP? Did you either feel it from a provider side or customer side? And if so, can you give a little bit of narrative and context to what you were dealing with?
Yeah, we felt it from both sides, from like some of our tools not working to, not being able to get to resources. And then, so many clients contacting us saying, I can't get to whatever service I'm trying to use. So we took the initiative to send out a message to any clients that we felt would be affected by this using specific platforms to try to get ahead of it. So if they hadn't noticed it yet, so we're telling them, just be aware, this is a provider outage, blah, 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 nothing for you to do. We'll let you know when it's back up. But it was felt for a while, and it brought up the importance of, like you were saying, tabletops. How are you practicing this? Do you have any process in place that if your primary provider is not out there, your people can still work? Or at least so they're not sitting idle, they still can go back to paper and pencil or, whatever forms that they were using before, or using, a different method to track information. So when their systems are back up, you just have to put that information in and move forward. So yes, it takes time, but it's not as much time as trying to catch up from doing nothing. But like you said, some organizations can say, we're down for the day, everybody go home. And that's a perfectly reasonable response. But not everybody can do that.
Right. Just a quick follow-up, Ned. I was on a call with Brian Blakely, and this will probably resonate with you from a VCSO practice perspective. He talks a lot about contract assessments, like greasing the, as a VCSO, we want to grease the skids of revenue, but we also want to mitigate risk from, the contract side of things. Now, this was something beyond our control, but he talks about, looking at your customers as an MSP, your customers' largest customer contracts, because there's, information in there that you've signed up for that those are the areas of interest to the executives, because let's say they couldn't get to their CRM, they couldn't get to systems that drive revenue, et cetera, et cetera. And that they may have SLA and contractual obligations. Maybe just pull on that thread just a little of the importance of that conversation as we see more and more of us trying to, like I see Eric Sunt out there that plays in this world. We really want to, get away from these technical conversations with executives, because do they care? Yes and no. They more care about what's going to impact revenue and reputational risk and potential contract violations, whether it's data security, a breach notification, things of that nature. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a big miss that a lot of people who are advising clients really have from the MSP perspective, is they're not taking that step to say, let me see the contracts of your biggest clients. For exactly those reasons. You want to know what your client is legally obligated to perform, right? And you need to know that as an advisor so that you can advise them. If you don't know those things, those are gaps. And if you don't ask, you won't know. They're not going to just offer that to you. And then you can see, like you said, what some of those requirements are for reporting and communications, but more so than that, what is your client actually committing to do? Many times when an agreement is signed, it's signed by decision makers on both sides, and the people who are actually executing on that never see that contract.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another gap. As an advisor, you can help to make sure that your client's employees know that they're supposed to be working within certain guidelines.
I think that's a great example of that. And it's, there's some things where as a service provider, you can and should, if not influence a contract, at least influence negotiations. For example, we're a small business. We sign mutual NDAs all the time to have exploratory discussions and things. And recently, we added in a clause that basically says, because there's clauses in there around, hey, if we terminate this or we ask you to, you have to delete all this confidential information. But we put a clause in that basically says, yes, except we don't have to delete it from our standard backup systems. Because can you imagine what a nightmare that would be? And I mean, literally, you'd be in breach of contract, and it would be impossible to go back through every single backup and delete certain files. So as an MSP, you should definitely give guidance. Hey, put that clause in there, work with your legal to make sure that you're not signing up for something that's technically impossible, or you're going to be violating the contract. Now, honestly, it's not that's a tiny violation and no one's going to get sued over it. But the outages that you mentioned, Nat, are a great example. Imagine that you have a single dependency on whatever cloud provider. They go down for 8 hours. You can't provide a service for 8 hours. So you could be on the hook for significant financial penalties. And that's a great example of, let's say you're using a ZTNA provider. You have a break glass backup VPN maybe that gives people remote access. So maybe it stinks from a security perspective, but it's 8 hours and everyone's on deck, and you're not putting yourself out for tens of thousands of dollars in penalties.
Yeah, and at least they've accepted the potential risk, right, Jason? Hey, we are willing to take that risk to keep production going, right? So good point. Phyllis, closing this out with you. One of the things that Brian also talks about is the right to audit sometimes in these contracts. And I love listening to him. I wish I could, summon him in here, but he's like, he says, in all the audits I've been through, whether it's FFIEC, ISO, you name it, right? He goes, customer audits are by far the most stringent and difficult ones. And he talks about a lot of times, again, in this language, we don't even realize our largest customers have the right to audit. And this, again, is like, hey, are you aware that you can get a call anytime that you have to do this? So what have you been through that? And so, because a lot of companies reach out to you and say, help us, right? Help us, Phyllis. Whether it's controls, policy, and things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what Jason alluded to is liability is the name of the game, and that's what motivates people. And that's what, we've kind of changed our messaging to that. So we do get organizations that are concerned about it. Honestly, a lot of them really are worried about the liability part of it. And like Jason says, you really have to look at your contract. You have to look at what it is you're obligated to provide, even, in the public sector, right? For example, the court system, they're obligated to provide these trials for people. They're obligated to provide it so that everyone has access, and even during the pandemic online, but it has to be secure. They have to protect victim data, all these kinds of things. And so, you don't realize how pervasive and how worried people get, right? So you have a major outage like this, and then people can't get services. Right. Yeah. And it becomes a bigger deal than what you think when it comes to like the public sector as well.
Yeah. And a lot of times the public sector fellows are providing health services.
Yes.
Public safety, you know, things that really can matter in a major way.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think the one thing, just to kind of maybe loop this, is it's one thing to be able to move to these manual processes, and it's another thing to reconcile after the fact. And that's what people lose sight of as well, right? I mean, that was coming from the banking world. That was always the tough thing, right? Is this isn't working. Okay, we can go to manual. oh man, now we have a day or 2 days, whatever worth of transactions that we have to reconcile and figure that stuff out. And during this AWS thing, I remember some big banks were impacted by this, and they were themselves going to have to probably do refunds and do all sorts of stuff to calculate overdrafts and all the stuff that happened. What was a result of this? What wasn't a result of this?
Mm-hmm.
So it gets pretty crazy. So that's another great conversation you can have with your clients is, okay, great. You have a manual process, but what is the outcome of having to do that and then moving back to your regular everyday process once that gets back up and running?
I think that's I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think that's a good point. I think I said this before on this call. My friend was hospitalized. She was in the ER during a ransomware event for her hospital. It's different, but the same. The nurses had no idea what to do.
Mm.
There was no training. They're used to like scanning your wrist, and they know what medicines you need. They know all. She said they were calling in, not to stereotype, these little old ladies from local doctors' offices to be like, this is how you look at a file. This is how you file this. This is how you write it down. Because like no one knew. It's that thing as well.
The COBOL programmers of the nursing home.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. They're unsung superheroes.
All right. Let's get on into it here. So let me set the stage, and we'll do some intros. So quick setting the stage. Look, this year, Chris, I shouldn't say just this year, the last 2 years, but certainly the last 24 months have absolutely, man, the VPN providers have just absolutely gotten trounced. I mean, in terms of, and whether it's, the fact that we know there's been vulnerable code, it's legacy code, there's legacy debt in this code. The threat actors just, you get a patch and they continue to hammer at it and find another way in, and we get another patch and another patch and another patch. So, today we're tackling, I would argue, one of the biggest shifts that's going to occur, right? You have the AI. Yes, we can talk about AI all day long, but I think one of the biggest shifts going on right now is for MSPs that'll happen over the next few years is getting people out of legacy, VPNs and remote access into, newer modern architectures, i.e., let me use the buzzwords, ZTNA, SASE. Great, I got them out of the way. We're going to talk about what it all means. But I think one of the big things I really want to talk about today and where it's going to come out is the how, right? How do you go about, because that's, as MSPs, right, we're sitting here with, tens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of customers in a certain architecture because we've standardized and it's the way we can deliver services at scale. Now we've got to have conversations, right? Shift everybody to our new stack and change the way in which they work, all for a good reason. But there's a lot of change, right? That will go on because of this. Not only change for customer, but change for the MSP, SOPs, documentation. We could go on and on and on. So that is really what I wanted to tackle today. And if we have hopefully we'll have time at the end, because Jason is doing a workshop, the most requested workshop, by the way, and conversation that came out of the voting for Right of Boom 2026 was, how do you transition, right, to a zero trust architecture for MSPs at scale? And Amit is going to be part of a fireside chat with Jason. So it's going to be really cool. So let me start off with intros. Jason, starting off with you, go to Amit, and then we will send it on over to Phyllis.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. And so I'm Jason Garbus. great to be here. I'm founder and CEO here at Numberline Security, and I spent over 30 years working for software vendors in a ton of different roles. In the last 15 on the information security side, and Andrew's holding up my book there, along with my co-founder and CTO Jerry Chapman. We wrote that book, Zero Trust Security and Enterprise Guide, and that really stemmed from both my work leading the product management organization at a ZTNA vendor, as well as a leadership role I have with the Cloud Security Alliance, where I co-chair the Zero Trust Working Group. So I founded this firm about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, exclusively to help enterprises to create and execute on effective zero trust strategies. And that includes, obviously, working with enterprises, government agencies, higher ed, working with MSPs as well. And I'm looking forward to this part of the conversation and clearly the conference where we talk about that. So we really bring a very vendor neutral and practical perspective to help organizations figure out how do they make sense of the strategy, which I'm a big believer in, obviously. How do they get value out of it, and how do they kind of treat it as more than something technical, but something that really does deliver value to users and the business. Yeah,
thanks for that, Jason. Really appreciate it. And Amit, awesome to have you for a first time on the Cyber Hall. You guys are really coming on strong in the MSP space. So it's cool that when you have a vendor that's led by a technologist that really has come from lived in the trenches. I always find that really intriguing. So thanks for joining us. Tell us a little about yourself and what you do there over at Timus.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm Ahmet Polat. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Timus Networks. I've been working in the industry for more than 20 years, building platforms for government agencies, enterprises, and I actually 10 years ago I started trying to find how can we make security better? How can we make it more automated, more like simpler for the smaller companies? Then I started a small company and built the whole platform, which later people started calling it SASE and Zero Trust. It was way back then. Then I merged with another company with my co-founder, Turul. Then we become Timus. And at Timus, we simplify network security, especially for MSPs and mid-market, by bringing Zero Trust and SASE together in a single cloud platform. We built Timus ground up from for the MSP ecosystem, multi-tenant, automated, and profitable to operate. And I promise this is the only Timus pitch you're gonna hear.
No, I asked you who you are and what you do, so that's okay. Yep. You're not gonna be talking about, but that was my ask. So appreciate you coming on. So Phyllis, let's bring it over to you.
Yeah, sure. So Jason, when you wrote Zero Trust in 2021, did you envision that it would become the anchor for ZTNA security architectures? Or were you just theorizing, hoping that it would, come into fruition one day?
So we wrote the book really based on our experiences. So Jerry comes at it from a system integrator, kind of VAR type of model where he ran identity and zero trust practices. And I came at it from the ZTNA vendor side of things. And we were both active in the Cloud Security Alliance. And I feel really lucky to have had that role because I had the opportunity to interact with so many different security practitioners and other researchers. So we had a good sense that zero trust and this ZTNA thing was coming for sure. And it was, we really started, what was interesting backstory, right, was that at the Cloud Security Alliance, when I first got involved way back in 2015, the working group was actually the software defined perimeter working group. So it was really focused on that narrow specification. And I think we can, we give ourselves a little bit of credit to help contribute to the industry. And as this zero trust tidal wave really hit, we realized, hey, we need to reach harder this group so we can appropriately focus on the breadth of what zero trust really is. And the network access side of things is a big part of it, but zero trust is a holistic strategy. And I think it properly, in my mind, the right way to think of it is across all the pillars of identity and devices, networks, applications and workloads and data. And the perhaps even more important ones, right? The cross-cutting capabilities of visibility and analytics, automation and orchestration, and governance.
Awesome, thanks. I'm glad you mentioned governance too. I think that's important that we miss. So Amit, every MSP knows that VPNs are fragile, slow, over-trusted, yet everyone wants them still. And so why do you think the VPN comfort zone is so hard to break?
They've been using VPN for remote access more than like 25 years. The technology was introduced way before that, but for the last 25 years, it was the go-to choice. And I believe it feels more familiar for the MSPs. The devil they know. But familiarity doesn't equal safety, as we're going to discuss today. They give users like a blanket access, and they create a massive lateral movement risk, because it's like connecting your cable to the actual device. So MSPs can break that comfort zone by, I think they need to question themselves. So this isn't about replacing VPNs. It's more like a modernizing access to corporate resources. So in my perspective, zero trust access tools are very much similar to what we have right now. So there's nothing to be scared, but they need to understand a set of principles. So it's going to give them the same connectivity experience with like faster performance, more granular control, with more automation, so that they can actually focus on what matters the most. And also, zero trust provides them more audit visibility compared to their legacy VPNs. And once the MSP see that ZTNA actually reduces their support tickets, their downtime, and the comfort zone with the VPNs will disappear very quickly. But they need to see that in action, how it contributes to their daily operations. Then it's going to be much easier.
Phyllis, let me just ask Chris a quick question regarding what Amit just said. Chris, what percent, from an IR perspective, between BECs and things, give or take, what percent are, VPN related for you? And based on that, is it similar in the sense of I'll use since we were talking about medical, the analogy, hey, you're going to have a heart attack if you don't stop smoking. You're going to have a heart attack if you don't start smoking. Hey, I had a heart attack, get bypass surgery. You know what? I'm going to go back to smoking. What percent just, we got compromised, but we're going to keep going to back to VPNs. What can you?
I couldn't nail down a percentage number, but it's a lot. And I'll tell you one thing that I'll add in here is there's a lot of vendor access given through those VPNs as well. So it's one thing to deal with the employees, but then you got these vendors and you're like, we can tell all our employees to change, but trying to coordinate with our vendors, and it may be just a dozen vendors, maybe less. That gets a little bit more complex. I would say that it's amazing how many want to jump and turn that VPN right back on as is without any type of configuration change or MFA. When we say, hey, look, okay, you can turn it back on, but we need to enable MFA. The pushback on that is, they come up with every excuse that you hear about MFA anyway. Oh, it's too hard, it's too cumbersome, it's going to be too disruptive, all that kind of stuff. I've mentioned this before. Hey, there's our additional co-host just came across that screen. But the other thing I'll mention is, I've had it to where people were like, well, that's why I have EDR. I don't need to put all those controls on VPN. I have EDR. EDR will stop any type of attacks. And I've heard that more than once in different ways, in different shapes, and different forms over the last 5 years. And it's just like Amit said. It definitely is a comfort zone. They're used to doing it. There's not a lot of thought into turning it on, and they don't have to worry about people not getting access to whatever they have because they get everything. So it's very easy.
I think that's a big part of it, Chris, is that maybe people jump to the wrong conclusion, which is, hey, if I put out a ZTNA, now I have to define all of these super fine grained access controls. And I don't know, right? It's too hard for me, the MSP, to have a model of, for across my customer base, who really needs access to what. And that's very much an end state, because you can, and it's a great starting point to shift over from a VPN to a ZTNA solution and give everyone the same broad network access they had with the VPN. Is it great? Okay, it's not great, but it's better than the VPN for a variety of reasons. And then you can start to work with your clients on, let's tighten those things up. And you have the right tool to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Phyllis, how much of this do you feel is over permission? Like, in other words, because we over permission so many as on the margin, right? Over permission that, you to Jason's point, wait a minute, I'm only going to have access to these and these things now, and it's going to be highly secure, and I can't, just roam wherever I want. No, you can't. Do you think it starts more with that the permissions have set, or over permissioning has set us up for that, if you will?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's kind of legacy, right? We were all used to crunchy outside, soft inside, right? It was like, here's our perimeter. This is it. And then, we kind of graduate. Oh, remote work. Oh, well, now you're just going to VPN to our perimeter, right? And then it's like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe back in the day, we all knew, oh, HR has to be separate from finance, has to be separate from whatever, right? You could firewall off the different departments. But this idea of, that granular permission really is intimidating, I have to say, as I work with different organizations. Listen, even when I was at the NSA, and, during that time, we started fighting wars. And the U.S. government fights war on the CIPRNet, which is our secret network. And then, trying to give permissions to allies and all those things, it was very complicated because, sometimes in the classified world, there's this assumption you have a clearance, right? Same thing with, private industry. It's like, oh, well, you're a member of our organization. We trust you, right? And so you have a badge, you badge into a lot of organizations, not just the government. And so you're good to go. We vetted you, blah, blah, blah. We trust everyone in this company. And so this idea of, I'm not going to let Chris see this or this or this, it does become very intimidating. And so I do find that people are like, wow, it kind of goes to classifying your data and only giving people access to certain data, right? And so everyone's like, what? That just becomes overwhelming. Trying to figure out where all your data is, where it's where I have to protect it, where it lays, all those kinds of things. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, back to you, Phyllis. But Ned, please make sure that cat has a clearance.
Yeah. She's been vetted and petted.
All right.
So Ned, we all know ZTNA isn't just a framework. It's a business model shift. So here's always the important question: how can MSPs monetize this, than just treat it as another service upgrade? And someone in the chat even said people don't want to move away from VPNs because it's more expensive to do it in a different way.
Absolutely. So I think the big key is when you're having these conversations, it shouldn't just be another thing you're selling. It really needs to be given the credence that it deserves, because like you said, it's not just another framework. And when you, as an MSP, when you start taking a client down the path of zero trust, it's everywhere. It's not one thing. Let me install this agent and you'll have zero trust. That's not how it works, right? And it's a way you need to look at the organization. So in doing this, you have to position it in a way that the client understands that it's a mind shift. It's more than just, here's another tool. It's, we're going to help you think differently about security. And we're going to help you build it into your company culture, because that's where you get the real adoption and you stop getting so much of that pushback, is when it comes from the top and you start thinking security first. So from an MSP perspective, the best way to get started on it is to think about it like a subscription bundle, right? It shouldn't be a single line item, because if you do single line item, add-on, a la carte, whatever you call it, clients generally don't take those, but they will take a package because they see more value in one line item that includes multiple things. And in doing that, it should include identity, device posture, policy enforcement, and also an evaluation of their business processes at least annually. Build that into your model, right? When you have a package, your package doesn't just have to be tools plus markup. It should also include your advising on their business policies, which is not technical. That's super important. And when you're having these conversations, you position it based on risk. This is about addressing your security posture and reducing the risk in your organization. And it's important that your clients understand that this isn't a one-time set it and forget it. This will always be something that you're going to need to continually update and improve and bring out new items as the threat landscape continues to change. So saying all that, making sure that the clients understand that this is not just about technology. Security is not the obligation of the MSP. It's always going to come down to the client. They own their own environment. We are just a partner. We just support, we just advise. So in a way to make that, or bring that point home to the client, is having those conversations around business processes, like making sure that they implement separation of duties, like the person intaking the invoices is not the person writing checks. That's an important one. You can't do that with technology. You have to have people bought in and a process around that. And another thing in accounting that tends to be an area that gets targeted a lot by threat actors is that any significant changes should be reviewed by at least two people or by two means, right? That's a business process. And you being an advisor to the client and having conversations around business process, like these two examples I just gave, that elevates you from being a vendor selling them something to helping them better secure their business so that they can keep staying in business. And last thing I'll say about it is align it to business outcomes, right? I gave two examples about business process, but align it to business outcomes, right? The more secure an organization is, the better they're going to be at things like M&A, whether they're getting acquired, looking to be sold, or they're looking to buy. Implementing zero trust internally, and then once they acquired new organizations, it makes it a lot easier and it reduces the risks significantly.
Yeah, Ned, and as we go over to Chris, I mean, also, right, about, we were talking about sales earlier, right? Like, of these, what about your high producing salespeople, or in your case with legal, right? Billing, right? I mean, you take 10, 20, in your case, some big law firms, take 100 lawyers offline for a few hours and see what that's going to do to the bottom line.
Yeah, so that's you don't want to upset the law firms, because they can sue you for nothing, for no money off their backs. Yeah.
They don't get the big legal bills that we get.
No, they don't. So you made some good points there with Phil's question. I guess my question is going to be a little bit more specific. Would be like, okay, hey, you're in front of the client, you're kind of, as the MSP, you're giving them the argument around security. They're going to come back to you and say, well, we're too small to be targeted, or somebody else is going to be targeted, or it's just going to cause us too much grief operationally. Why would I want to deal with that? So, if you're sitting there in front of the client, kind of give us what you would be telling the client in those situations.
So first thing is reframing that first objection you said. I'm too small, right? We've heard that objection since EDR first came out, since antivirus first came out, actually. Organizations always say, I'm too small. Well, the thing is, just because you're small doesn't mean you're invisible. Attackers automate scans and exploit weak links. And it doesn't matter the size of the organization. They want to get in there and they want to either disrupt or exfiltrate or cause some sort of confusion, or you're just a jumping point to their next place, wherever the real target is. So just because you're small doesn't mean you're invisible. So you still need to protect yourself. And there's no part of security that every organization doesn't need. Every organization needs every part of security on a different scale based on your specific environment, but the larger organizations have a bigger budget. So smaller organizations have a budget more size to what they can afford, which means they have less security, which makes them a more attractive target. So just because you're small doesn't mean they're going to skip over you. So once you dispel that myth, then you have to pivot into operational benefits. So when you have clients that say, it's too much disruption, too much change, my people aren't going to like it, I get all that, right? And if you don't understand these things that I'm going to recommend, I could definitely see where you're coming from making those assumptions. But let me take you through and tell you some of these benefits, these business benefits that are going to help the business be more efficient, which most clients say is something that they want, is more efficiency, be more resilient, right? Because most organizations, cybersecurity is at the top of their list of things that keep them up at night. So talk about, VPNs cause headaches, right? Talk about how often users are having issues with connecting to VPNs, or their password's not working, or their MFA token isn't coming through, whatever it is. And that goes away. These headaches that you've heard about all this time, all of that goes away. Your users have a better experience, right? It goes from taking these extra steps and things not working properly, time to reboot and try again, all that's downtime. Let's take that out of the equation and give them a better experience so they can do what they need to do their jobs and continue bringing in that money.
Yeah, I mean, on the first part, I was going to say, I've seen it too, where companies thought they weren't the victim, but in reality, they were. The bad guys got in there, figured out there was really nothing to gain specifically from attacking them, but used them as a reconnaissance module against the actual victim that they found, where there was a bigger payday. So it's funny. I mean, seeing it with BECs, we're like, hey, our client or whatever got duped, and then we start digging in. We're like, no, you're the first one to actually get compromised, and it was all the information that they gained, knowledge that they gained from your environment that allowed them to target those guys successfully. And so, no, you're exactly right. I'm going to swing over to Jason now, and Jason, you use the term zero trust is not a journey; it's a journey, not a project. What is the first measurable milestone an MSP should look at when they're implementing zero trust, specifically ZTNA, probably?
I was thinking about this before the call, and it's, I think the first thing is just internally, right, is to design what is zero trust. How are you portraying this for your clients? And, Net gave some great examples a few minutes ago of ways to talk about this and sell the value of it. And I think as part of that is to think about, do you even call this zero trust? If you look at your market, typically smaller organizations, zero trust may not mean anything to them, whereas you portray it along some of the lines that Net mentioned of, hey, this is ransomware resilience. This is improving user productivity. This is, enabling the business to do more interesting things more easily, or preventing downtime. That could be a key part of, the selling story here, the value proposition that could encourage people to sign up for additional line items from you, or this additional package. And, internally, you can call it zero trust. You're utilizing these zero trust capabilities, but the first step is designing your program in a way that makes sense for you and your organization and your clients. In terms of something that's actually measurable, clearly it's going to be, okay, how many initial sets of customers do we have on board as part of this program, and where do they stand from a maturity perspective, and how far do we want to go with them? Because not all clients going to go all the way up to, let's say, optimal and across all the areas. That simply doesn't make sense. But you want to have a clear destination in mind. So I think doing that assessment of figuring out how do you portray and sell this, and then where do your clients stand in their kind of micro journeys, are the important first steps.
Yeah, I agree. I think you get some wins under your belt, and then you can use them as use cases for the rest of your clients. I mean, I think most MSPs, especially the ones on their call, understand that. This has been a big topic. I mean, especially since we've seen all these vulnerabilities that over the last 12 months, MSPs have walked up to me and said, "Hey, what do we do?" I mean, I've got literally thousands and thousands of employees and other people that I use this stuff that I'm having to support. And I'm like, yeah, you got to start somewhere. So you're right. I think when people look at it as being that big of a task, you're always going to be freak out. I think you got to carve it up into smaller points and get some wins and start doing it that way. That's good. So Amit, SASE promises convergence of network and security. In the real world of MSPs who are juggling, let's just call it 20 vendors. We know there's probably MSPs out there juggling 100 vendors. How does a good SASE provider make that convergence practical?
Working with like a lot of MSPs, what I've seen is like convergence only matters if it reduces the operational drag. Everybody's talking about SASE, ZTNA. Everybody's afraid of SASE and ZTNA because they don't know how big and how complex it is. But in essence, you just need to start from somewhere, right? So I can easily lecture about like how a SASE vendor should operate, should provide, but they should take it as a like step-by-step project, right? If you're after SASE, means you're after applying some kind of zero trust principles in there. And as a first step, you need to start with identity-based access, right? If you can tie every connection into a verified user and device, in my perspective, you already achieved like 60% of zero trust because now you know the user, you know the device and how they're operating. And after that, you can start building like device posture checks that ensures only healthy devices can connect to the network. Then after you automate those things, then you can progress further into contextual policies like location, device, behavior, analytics, and everything. So to me, a good SASE provider that should give MSPs a single policy plane over identity, network, context, device posture without forcing them to rip and replace something except for the VPNs. Most of our partners that I've seen, they kept their existing VPNs for a while until they figure out, understand how both solutions compare. Then they actually rip and replace the other ones, the existing VPN stacks, more easily. So our vision at Timus is to integrate instead of dictating. A good SASE provider shouldn't scare the MSPs, should help them understand the technology. So plugging into PSA, plugging into their identity providers, SIEM, SOAR, especially EDRs. So it's not about providing everything as an all-in-one product. It's about giving them bits and pieces first and the whole platform to automate things for them so that MSPs can deliver a unified outcome while keeping the tools they already trust in there. And in the end, the win for the MSP should be like after if you're aiming convergence, it should be the simplicity, right? Fewer vendors, faster troubleshooting, and consistent secure access for their clients.
Question real quick, Chris, if I could, to Jason, and feel free afterwards to chime in on it. Jason, when you and I worked together back in the day, one of the things I really liked about the system you architected was, it would be, hey, here's my entitlements, what I can, get to. And on the minute or faster, I'm going to keep checking EDR, I'm going to keep checking MFA and all these different security protocols and tools. Like it almost seems like it's a blue team in a box also. Has it ever been positioned that way, or did you position it ever that way, Jason, when you were doing it? And love your comments on it as well.
Yeah, it's definitely, when we talk about that, we talk about it as the policy decision point within Zero Trust is utilizing a set of signals and events from across the system. And those signals and events happen or get received at various times. And some of them are clearly at the time of authentication. We know there's certain things that happen, like the identity provider is contacted and the user is authenticated and identity attributes come in. And typically at that point in time, there's also attributes that are pulled in from, say, the endpoint management system, et cetera. Then there's other things that happen during a session, and it might be just proactively, like, hey, our network monitoring system or our endpoint management is detecting anomalous activity. So, hey, PDP, you need to do something about this device, or the risk score has gone up. Or it might be driven by, I'm attempting to access a particular resource, and maybe I have to satisfy a step-up MFA prompt. So it's nice to view it as a very nice, dynamic, real-time system. And I think for many organizations, as Ahmet mentioned, you deploy this and you connect it up to your endpoint management or your identity provider if it's calculating risk or other elements of your system. That's a great destination. It's not necessarily the first step for everyone, because you just want to make sure you're not building something that's too brittle, it's so intricate that if one little thing breaks, that the whole thing comes tumbling down. So there's a nice balancing act there of understanding, where do these signals come from, what's the connection there, and what happens if my XDR system, if I don't get updates for 15 minutes because it's down.
Yeah. Gosh, imagine if it ran on AWS.
Yeah.
Chris, in fairness, let me let you keep asking, because there's another question here for Ahmet. And
and I have another question. Yeah, I think for Jason, like, how does an MSP determine if a client's network is not ready for a zero trust rollout?
I think, it's a hard question to answer, because I usually take the approach of zero trust is very much a come as you are party. So no matter where you are, right, you could take the stance, no matter where you are, you can start with zero trust, because it's a strategy. And really in any organization, you can look at it and say, okay, I know I'm strong over here, I'm weak over there. Maybe everything's a big mess because it hasn't been tended to. And there's at some point where you say, all right, I can't build this thing on a foundation of sand. The reality is that probably for all but the most pathological organizations, there are going to be some elements where you can start with zero trust. And even with your existing technology, by improving certain processes and making sure you start to get better visibility. But having said that, if the network, if people don't really don't understand, if the thing is barely functional, same thing on the identity side. If you don't have reliable authentication, if you don't have reliable information, maybe you have too many systems that are patchwork together, there's some point where things are so bad, you got to fix them first before you get started. But I really caution that, only because it's a very easy trap to fall into, which is, hey, we'll get to zero trust as soon as we fix problem X. And when people think about fixing problem X, it's making it perfect or making it super awesome instead of just good enough to get started with.
All right, thanks. It's back to you, Net, and the cat.
And the cat, the real boss of the household. All right, question for Ahmet. What internal cultural shifts do MSPs need to make to deliver on the zero trust promise?
Very good question. So the biggest shift is from tools to frameworks, right? They need to understand how should they design or redesign their existing network topologies to adjust with the zero trust. And recently, I've been thinking, talking to a lot of CISOs, how they are applying zero trust principles in their enterprise environments. They have all the tools, all the budgets, yes, but they have tens of people, hundreds of people in their organization. So some of them are using their existing SOAR, SIEM tools. They're configuring their EDRs. They aren't directly using a zero trust product. They are not using a direct SASE product, but they are applying the same principles throughout their whole organization with all these different tools, right? But with the MSPs, it's very much different. They don't have all these resources. They only have a couple of people to support their clients, and the profitability depends on how long does it take to configure a product, and how long does it take to resolve an issue for the client. So zero trust is not about adding another box, adding another solution to their stack. It's about applying continuous validation, visibility across everything they manage. It includes their EDRs, it includes their identity providers, as well as their zero trust platform of their choice. So technicians have to start thinking in terms of policy and posture, not in terms of connectivity. With the VPNs, they were always like, am I connected? Now you're connected. That's good. It's not about that. It's about, does it compliant with our security policy? Does this device is in compliance with our security posture? So culturally, that means tighter collaboration. If they have security and networking teams separately, but they need to start evaluating all their existing tool stack in terms of like, in a mindset of never assume trust, always verify the context. So I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's a big shift for a lot of MSPs. So follow up on that. How do you recommend engineers, VCIOs, VCSOs, who's ever giving recommendations to clients, be trained to articulate zero trust into business language and not just technical jargon?
Oh, I like this question. So I think it was like a month ago, maybe two. Andrew, I've seen your one of your cyber call videos on LinkedIn, and there was this talk. I think it was Brian Blakely talking about the same topic. So the thing is like translate risk into impact. You cannot win those arguments within the board, within the clients, with talking about security posture, like this risk level, all these things. You need to translate it into business impact. So you just don't say like lateral movement through flat networks. We are the ones who should say that. But for the MSPs, for the VCSOs, you should say a single breach can stop all your operations. This is the money you're going to lose. You don't say like micro-segmentation. You just say, we limit the blast radius. So one infected laptop doesn't take down your whole organization. So MSP leaders and VCSOs should train their teams to connect every technical control to uptime, compliance, and productivity versus all the zero trust SASE jargon in the background. And that's, in my opinion, how you turn zero trust from a security buzzword into a business value story.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Nat, we all know Carl Bickmore over at Snaptech, and one of the things he does is he literally has he's developed his little MBA course, if you were, and he literally puts a group of his team through it every 6 months, just to make sure they understand how to read a P&L, how to look at what the business leaders care about, the financials, so that they can have conversations that they care about, and they've been having great success with it. So I'm glad to hear you're kind of in line with that theory.
Yep.
Back to you now.
All right, Jason, you're up. Question for you. What recent real-world breach best illustrates why legacy VPN no longer meets the moment?
There's so many to choose from. I think we could look at both the Ingram Micro one from earlier this year, which was directly attributed to stolen credentials for VPN, and then the overall Ivanti set of vulnerabilities. Ivanti obviously is a network provider that provides a VPN, so you had a very widespread set of customers that were going to be made vulnerable through that. And I think it's the thing to keep in mind is that no matter which VPN provider you have, you could say they're all bad, that they all are built on the same fundamentally flawed model, which is you have this service that you're deliberately exposing to everyone on the planet, all the malicious actors as well as your legitimate employees. And it is an open network service saying, connect to me here I am, I'm from vendor X, I'm version Y, take advantage of my vulnerabilities or try to guess passwords and things like that. And that's fundamentally the wrong way to do things in today's age.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, AI and automation, Jason, alone have given the threat actor such an asymmetric advantage, right? Through scanning techniques and, just being able to, you pick a service out there, whether it's Shodan or anything that they can leverage at scale. And now, the ability to correlate all of that with identity, with the huge credential dumps they've had. I mean, it's mind-boggling how, Chris, I know, saw this, day in and day out. Right? And, yeah. Anyway, back to you.
So one more for you, Jason. Looking 5 years ahead, will the term zero trust fade into the background like firewall becoming assumed infrastructure, or will it keep evolving as a differentiator?
It's the term zero trust was first introduced 15 years ago, believe it or not, in 2010. I guess it's not it's not a crazy prediction to say in 5 years we'll still be talking about that. And I think that I've been maybe an early indicator of this, right, is that we don't have an alternative, right? There's no big alternative or even small alternative where people are saying, no, zero trust is not the right way to do it. There's something else, whatever it's called. There certainly are critics, and I'm happy to have conversations with critics and skeptics around zero trust. Those are great conversations to have because you can get to something substantive in there. And zero trust definitely captures best practices in the industry, and it builds on that. So there's some element, if you want to, I don't want to have time to go into it, but hey, this is old wine in new bottles. There are some certainly new elements to this. So I guess my prediction is that we will be talking about zero trust, and hopefully what we'll do is we'll have a lot of fantastic success stories where we've learned here's a better, more effective, and more reliable way to accomplish this, because it can be hard because so many organizations have so much immaturity on the governance side and the security side.
Yeah. Well said, Jason. Well said. I can't believe we're already at the top of the hour, and we could go for literally another hour on this subject. Amit, any closing comments as we wrap up today? And again, thanks for joining us. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, everyone. It was awesome joining you here. My 2 cents on the future of zero trust and SASE. In my opinion, it's here to stay. It's gonna be living as an assumed architecture like firewalls, because finally the security guys figured out a way to agree on something. It was like we had SSL VPN, we had IPsec, we had PPTPs back then, right? We could agree on some kind of protocols, but we couldn't came up with the whole framework on how to secure things. But now we do. Jason, a great book about it, right? We have white papers, we have the NIST documents, for example, how zero trust should be applied. And it's the first time, I think, not every vendor is applying their own ways into it. There's a standard of doing things. So here to stay, and in my opinion, what will remain as a differentiator is that how adaptive and automated your implementation is for the MSPs. So great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ahmed. Jason, thanks so much for joining, and Phyllis, awesome seeing you as always. Net, thanks for co-hosting, and by the way, Chris, I think this is the last week for early bird at Right Boom. So
that's right. Spread the word. I know most of you probably are coming, but spread the word.
Yeah,
we need you all there.
We'll look forward to seeing you there, and make it a great week, everybody. Be safe, and we'll see you next Monday. Take care.